There's a moment, just before sleep takes hold, when the world feels thinner, when the veil between reality and myth seems to fray at the edges. That's when the whispers begin. The kind that curl around your thoughts, pulling you deeper into the shadows of forgotten stories. Tonight, we step into one of those stories, one bound in crimson leather and written in ink that still glows faintly under the right gaze. Welcome to the dark fantasy realm of the Crimson King's Court, a place where the echoes of a lost dynasty linger just beyond the edge of hearing. Whether you're listening under the hush of midnight or the first light of dawn, we'd love to know where your journey into this hidden world begins. Tell us in the comments below, what time is it where you are, and what secrets do you think the Crimson King left behind? Imagine a scholar, his fingers trembling as they trace the cracked spine of an ancient tome. His name is Elrian, and he's spent years chasing fragments of this legend, piecing together whispers of a court that vanished without a trace. The book he holds now is different. The moment he opens it, the air hums with a melody that shouldn't exist, a sound that tugs at something deep in his chest. The ink on the pages pulses like a heartbeat, as if the words themselves are alive, waiting to be read. And then there's the throne, the whispering throne. They called it carved from a single shard of obsidian, said to sing to those who dare to listen, but the song isn't sweet. It's a warning. Elrian stands at the edge of a choice. To close the book now would mean sealing away the truth forever, leaving the Crimson King's story to fade into dust. But to keep reading, that would mean unraveling a thread that could pull him, and perhaps all of us, into a realm where the shadows have teeth, where the court's ghosts still walk in silence. This is the moment where legends either die or awaken, and as the first words of the tome take shape in his mind, he realizes some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. So tell me, as we step into this twilight tale together, would you have the courage to turn the page? The air in the Hall of Echoes doesn't move, not truly. It hangs thick, like the pause between heartbeats, heavy with the weight of words spoken centuries ago. Elrian's lantern gutters, casting long shadows that twist into shapes too deliberate to be chance. The walls here aren't stone, they're memory made solid, etched with the remnants of the Crimson King's proclamations, each decree half faded, as if the very palace is trying to forget. And then there are the voices, not echoes, not quite, more like reflections, fractured and overlapping, whispers of a court that refused to die with its king. A figure materializes from the gloom, its form wisp thin, the edges of its robe dissolving into the dark. The specter's fingers clutch a quill that drips ink like blood, and when it speaks, the sound is parchment tearing. You seek the chamber beyond. It rasps, and Elrian feels the words scrape against his bones. But passage demands a price, a vow never given voice. The scribe's hollow eyes bore into him, and suddenly he understands. This isn't a test of knowledge, it's a test of hunger. How much does he want the truth? Enough to surrender his voice, to let the silence claim his tongue forever, or his memory to forget why he ever stepped into this hall at all. Somewhere in the darkness, the whispering throne's song rises, a low, insistent thrum that vibrates through the soles of his boots. It's laughing at him. Because the cruelest riddles aren't those without answers, They are the ones where every answer cuts deeper than the last. And as the specter leans closer, its breath smelling of old ink and older secrets, Elrian knows one thing with terrible certainty. The Crimson King's court doesn't welcome guests. It consumes them. The silence settles over Elrian like a second skin, thick and suffocating, as the specter's quill presses against his lips. A cold rush floods his throat, not pain, but absence, as if his voice has been plucked from him like a string from a lute. The hall trembles, dust shaking loose from the ceiling as the walls split apart, revealing a corridor lined with mirrors. But these aren't ordinary mirrors. They don't reflect his face, they reflect his stumbles, his hesitations, every time he turned back instead of pressing forward. The glass shudders, and a shadow peels itself from the surface, a twisted double of Elrian with hollow eyes and a smile too sharp to be human. You've always known how this ends. The shadow hisses, its voice the scrape of a blade against stone. The Crimson King's court devours the curious. Why else would the throne still whisper, "It's waiting for you"? The words coil around Elrian's ribs, tightening with each breath. He glances down at the tome in his hands, its pages now glowing faintly, as if in protest. The shadow laughs, a sound like cracking ice, and gestures to the mirrors. Look closer, see how far you'll fall. Elrian's fingers dig into the book's spine. The weight of his choice presses down. To step back now would mean carrying this silence forever, a lifetime of unanswered questions. But to move forward, that means facing the thing that scares him most, the possibility that the shadow is right. The air thrums with tension as he raises his fist and drives it into the nearest mirror. The glass explodes not into shards, but into 1,000 fluttering moths, their wings dusted with the same eerie glow as the tome's ink. The shadow snarls, dissolving into the darkness as the path ahead clears, revealing a bridge. It isn't stone or wood. It's bone smooth, yellowed, arching over a chasm so deep the bottom is lost to blackness. Names are carved into each rib of the bridge, some fresh, others worn nearly to nothing by time. Elrian recognizes a few from the tome's margins. Historians, explorers, fools like him, who thought they could uncover the Crimson King's secrets without paying the price. The bridge groans as he steps onto it, the bones shifting under his weight like living things. Below, something stirs in the abyss, a slow, slithering movement that sends a chill up his spine. The Whispering Throne's song grows louder here, a melody that doesn't comfort. It beckons, and then he hears it, a voice not his own, but one he knows. It's the scribe from the Tome, the one who first recorded the Crimson King's reign. The words are faint, buried under centuries of silence, but they're clear enough. Crossing is easy. The hard part is remembering why you did. Elrian's foot hovers over the next bone, the name etched into it nearly faded. He doesn't need to read it to know what it says. The bridge isn't just a test of courage. It's a ledger, and his name is already waiting. The bridge shudders as Elrian takes another step, the bones beneath his feet groaning like old hinges. With each movement, something shifts in the marrow, not just beneath him, but inside him, as if his own skeleton remembers this place. The air thickens with the scent of rust and damp parchment, and then he sees it. A figure wreathed in mist, its form flickering between solid and smoke. A crown of thorns circles its brow, the spikes digging into flesh that never bleeds. The Wraith's voice is the sound of wind through dead branches. Toll must be paid, it murmurs, extending a hand that's more shadow than substance. Not gold, not blood, a memory, one that lights the dark corners of your mind. Elrian's breath catches. The request isn't arbitrary. The Crimson King's court feeds on what sustains mortals, not just flesh, but hope. He knows what he must surrender before the Wraith even names it. The memory of his first victory, the day he unearthed the lost chronicle of Viridian, the blind, and felt, for the first time, the thrill of discovery. The recollection is warm in his palms, glowing like embers, but as he offers it up, the light gutters out. The Wraith inhales, and the memory unravels like thread from a spool, vanishing into its vaporous form. For a heartbeat, Elrian feels nothing. Then the absence hits him, a void where certainty once lived. The Wraith dissolves, its thorned crown clattering to the bridge before turning to dust. But the loss lingers. The tome in Elrian's hands grows heavier, its pages whispering in a language he no longer fully understands. Ahead, the gates of the Crimson Court rise black iron, twisted into the shape of interlocked hands, their fingers frozen in agony. At their center, a lock shaped like a weeping eye stares back at him. The pupil dilates as he approaches, and a voice, thick with the weight of centuries, slithers into his thoughts. You've given a memory, but to enter, you must give something greater. A question. Elrian's fingers twitch. The court doesn't want answers. It thrives on the unasked, the unresolved. The eye's tear streaks rust down the gate, and he realizes the truth too late. The lock isn't meant to be opened. It's meant to be answered, and the question it hungers for is the one he's carried since he first opened the tome. What happened to the Crimson King? But to voice it here, in this place where every word has weight, would be to surrender the last thing he owns, his curiosity, the very thing that brought him this far. The gate creaks, not in warning, but in anticipation. It already knows. Some doors don't need keys, they need sacrifices. The eye lock blinks once, slow, deliberate, like the closing of a tomb. A voice like crumbling parchment unfurls in Elrian's mind, dusty and insistent. Confess, it demands, not your sins, but your sorrows, the weight you carry when no one watches. His throat tightens. The truth claws its way up before he can stop it. I'm afraid of being forgotten. The admission hangs in the air, trembling, and the gate groans as if wrenched by invisible hands. The iron fingers unclasp, their rusted joints weeping black tears, and the path ahead yawns open. The court is a tableau of arrested time. Nobles lean toward one another, their mouths half open, whispers petrified mid-breath. A feast rots on silver platters, the meat long turned to dust, the wine evaporated into stains darker than blood. At the center of it all, the Crimson King slumps on his shattered obsidian throne, his crown askew, fingers curled around the hilt of a blade, plunged into his own chest. The air thrums with a chant so low it vibrates in Elrian's teeth, a dirge sung by the walls themselves. The tome in his hands jerks, its pages fluttering as if caught in a gale, pulling him toward the throne. Then light, a figure steps from behind the king's seat, wreathed in ember glow, its cloak sewn from the last flickers of dying stars. The guardian's face is a shifting mosaic of every historian who ever sought this place and failed. Its voice is the crackle of burning vellum. You've come far enough to choose, it says, extending a hand toward the crown. Take it, and the court's power is yours. Secrets, knowledge, a name that will never fade. The crown gleams, its jagged edges catching the dim light, and for a heartbeat, Elrian feels the pull, the hunger to be remembered. But the Guardian's other hand gestures to the frozen courtiers, or it murmurs, break the cycle, shatter the throne, their souls have lingered too long. The chant swells, and Elrian realizes with a jolt. It's not a dirge, it's a plea. The king's glassy eyes seem to follow him, not with malice, but exhaustion. The blade in his chest isn't a weapon, it's a key. The Guardian leans close, its breath scorching. Power or mercy, scholar, but choose quickly. The court is patient, but the abyss beneath us. It's always hungry. The tome goes still in Elrian's grip. The pages fall open to an illustration he's never seen before. A hand gripping the hilt of the king's blade, pulling it free. The ink is fresh, wet, as if the book is rewriting itself in real time. The Guardian watches, silent now, its ember light dimming. The choice isn't about courage or greed. It's about what echoes after. Will he let the Crimson King's fear become his legacy, or will he carve a new ending into the bones of this place? Somewhere deep in the court, the first mirror cracks. Elrian's fingers graze the crown's jagged edge, and the world shatters. Fire floods his vision, not as memory, but as lived agony. The Crimson King's reign unfolds in flashes, a hand raised in false benevolence, then lowered to sign execution orders. A library burning, its scrolls curling to ash as scholars scream behind barred doors. The throne room's obsidian floor cracking under the weight of 1,000 whispered betrayals. And beneath it all, the relentless hum of the whispering throne, not singing, drilling, burrowing into the king's mind until his thoughts are no longer his own. The crown isn't power, it's a parasite, its thorns sinking deeper with each decree, leeching the king's will until only the throne's hunger remains. Elrian wrenches back with a gasp, his palms seared by the vision. The Guardian's ember cloak dims, its mosaic face resolving into a single grief-stricken expression. You see now, it murmurs, and for the first time, the voice isn't ancient, it's young, trembling. The voice of the king's last scribe. We were never the jailers, we were the jailed. Around them, the petrified courtiers twitch, their stone lips parting in silent screams. The throne's chant swells, but beneath it, Elrian hears the counterpoint. A frail, desperate rhythm. The tome in his hands pulses in time with it, its pages fanning open to reveal lines of ink that twist like living tendrils, forming a spell older than the court itself. The Guardian collapses to its knees, its cloak unraveling into dying sparks. Break the chain, it pleads, and as the words leave its lips, Elrian understands the true curse. The Crimson King wasn't destroyed by rebellion or treachery. He drove the blade into his own heart to sever the throne's hold, but the crown refused to let go. It anchored his soul here, along with every soul who ever swore allegiance, turning the court into a grotesque monument to thwarted escape. The Guardian's outstretched hand isn't offering power. It's begging for the strike that will finally shatter the prison. The tome's glow intensifies, its pages now too bright to look at directly. The counter-chant rises from the vellum, a melody woven from the scribe's last defiance, the king's final moment of clarity, the whispers of all who tried to burn this place down from within. Elrian's hand steady as he raises the book, its light cutting through the court's oppressive gloom. The frozen nobles shudder, their stone shells cracking as the spell takes hold. And then the crown shrieks. The sound is metallic, alive, the scream of something that knows its end has come. The throne's obsidian surface webs with fractures, its whisper rising to a deafening wail. Elrian doesn't hesitate. He brings the tome down onto the crown with all the strength of the forgotten, the erased, the voices the Crimson King tried to silence. The impact sends a shockwave through the court, toppling the petrified figures, shaking loose centuries of dust. For one suspended moment, everything is blinding white. Then silence, true silence. The crown lies in pieces, its thorns withered to brittle husks. The throne is gone, only a circle of scorched stone marks where it once stood. Around Elrian, the nobles stir, their forms translucent now, their faces slack with disbelief. The Guardian's ember light flickers once, twice, before dissolving into a shower of harmless sparks. As the last one fades, the scribe's voice lingers, softer than a sigh. Thank you, but the chamber isn't empty. At the center of the scorched circle, the king's blade gleams, untouched by time. And wrapped around its hilt, like a promise, is a single thread of crimson silk, still damp. The king's specter lifts a hand, not to stop Elrian, but to point beyond the disintegrating arches, toward a sliver of sky visible through the buckling stone. His lips move, but the sound is swallowed by the roar of collapsing masonry. Only the tome catches the words, its pages flaring as the king's final whisper etches itself into the vellum in ink that shimmers like liquid starlight. The ground lurches beneath Elrian's feet, throwing him forward as the last pillars groan and splinter. He hits the bridge of bones just as it begins to crumble, the names carved into its ribs flaking away like old paint. Behind him, the court folds in on itself, not with destruction's cacophony, but with the quiet exhale of something finally at rest. Yet the tome won't let him leave. It burns against his chest, not with heat, but insistence, its weight doubling as he scrambles up the shuddering path. The ink on its newest page swirls, resolving into an image that steals his breath. A single sapphire-eyed child, standing in a sunlit field, holding a fragment of obsidian no larger than a coin. The connection snaps into place. This isn't just the court's end. It's a beginning. The bridge gives way. Elrian falls, not into the abyss, but through it, the darkness peeling back like a curtain to reveal ordinary grass beneath his knees. Dawn's light stings his eyes. The air smells of dew and wild thyme, not dust and old blood. For a dazed moment, he wonders if it was all a fever dream. Then the tome falls open in his lap, its final page glowing softly. The child from the illustration stands barely 20 paces away, her small fingers uncurling to reveal the obsidian shard. It pulses once, in perfect sync with the book. The truth settles over him like a mantle. The Crimson King's curse wasn't just broken, it was transformed. The court's shadows didn't vanish, they scattered, seeking new hands to carry their lessons without repeating their mistakes. The child tilts her head, as if listening to a voice only she can hear, then smiles. Somewhere in the distance, a crow calls, its cry sharp and clear against the morning quiet. Elrian knows what comes next isn't an ending, it's a question. And for the first time since he opened that cursed tome, the silence doesn't frighten him. It thrums with possibility. The sky above Elrian bleeds from ink black to the pale gold of dawn, as if the world itself is exhaling after centuries of held breath. The tome in his hands falls open to a page that was blank moments ago, now bearing a single sentence that glows faintly, as though written in liquid dawnlight. The keeper must remember. The words sear into him, and suddenly his throat burns. The stolen voice rushes back, raw and rasping, carrying with it the weight of every memory he bartered away. But they don't return as they left. The court's sorrow clings to them like cobwebs, the scribe's ink stained fingers trembling as he penned his final defiance. The king's last gasp before the blade found his heart, the whispered pleas of courtiers who never meant their oaths to outlive them. A shadow peels itself from the ground at Elrian's feet, darker than absence, its edges fraying like burnt parchment. It doesn't speak. It doesn't need to. The offer unfolds in his mind with the quiet inevitability of a falling leaf. Serve. Chronicle the realms that slip through time's cracks, the stories too strange or sorrowful for mortal tongues. Carry them as the Crimson King could not. The shadow extends a hand not to grasp, but to bestow. Power thrums in the space between them, the kind that doesn't corrupt, but costs. To accept would mean walking paths where the air tastes of forgotten alphabets, where libraries are built from the bones of fallen gods, but the shadow's other hand points west, toward the waking world. The choice is simpler than it seems, not between duty and freedom, but between two kinds of chains. One binds him to the weight of memory, the other to the ache of all that will be lost if he refuses. The tome trembles in his grip, its pages rustling like restless wings. Somewhere beyond the hill, the sapphire-eyed child watches, her obsidian shard catching the light. She doesn't know it yet, but she's already holding the first thread of the next story. Elrian closes his eyes. The wind carries the scent of rain and turned earth, of things growing and things returning to the soil. When he opens them again, the shadow is waiting, not impatiently, not hungrily, just there as shadows are, as they always will be. The question isn't whether he'll choose. It's whether he understands what choosing really means. To be a keeper isn't to preserve, it's to listen, and some stories don't end when the last page turns. They simply change hands. Elrian's fingers tighten around the quill, its shaft cool as moonlit water, but pulsing with a rhythm that matches his own heartbeat. The moment the tip touches his palm, visions surge through him, not as images, but as sensations. The grit of desert wind, carrying a city's last song before the sands claim it. The salt sting of a ship's deck, as it vanishes beneath waves ink, black with drowned secrets. The weightless terror of a scribe, etching final words onto their own skin, as darkness swallows the room. These aren't memories, they're debts. Stories the world tried to bury, now twisting roots into his marrow. The shadow's voice is the scrape of a moth's wing against glass. The next realm waits beneath the roots of the weeping willow, at the crossroads where 3 counties forget their names. The words carve themselves behind Elrian's eyelids in phosphorescent script, but the shadow isn't finished. It presses a finger, lighter than cobweb, colder than midwinter, to his sternum. You'll hunger differently now. Truth will taste like copper on your tongue. Lies will smell of wet ash, And when the forgotten ones whisper, you must answer, not with your voice. It taps the quill against the tome's open page. With this, the ground sighs beneath him, softening into something between soil and mist. As he sinks, the tome's pages erupt with frantic scribbles, ink blooming like bruises across parchment. Names, dates, fragments of dirges in languages that died before stone learn to stand upright. The last thing he sees before the earth closes over him is the shadow's form unraveling into a flock of starlings, each bird carrying a single syllable of its final warning in its beak. Then darkness, not the absence of light, but the kind that pulses, that breathes. Elrian doesn't fall. He's pulled, as if by the current of some subterranean river, the quill in his hand glowing faintly, casting just enough light to reveal the walls of the tunnel. They are not dirt or stone, their pages, millions of them, pressed together like strata, their edges brittle with age. Some whisper as he passes, others weep. One, streaked with something dark and sticky, peels loose to brush his cheek, imprinting a single word against his skin in letters that burn. Remember. The current slows. Above him, roots dangle like skeletal fingers, their knuckled joints twitching as if plucking music from the air. The quill's glow intensifies, drawn toward a knot of wood where the roots twist into a shape that makes Elrian's stomach lurch. A perfect replica of the Whispering Throne, down to the jagged crack where the king's blade struck. Something wet hits his shoulder, then another. The roots are bleeding, not sap, but thick, clotted drops that reek of iron and old roses. The tome jerks in his grip, flipping to a page where fresh ink spirals into an illustration of a door. No, a mouth. Its lintel formed by two birch trees bent in agony, their bark peeled back to reveal sinew beneath. The caption beneath it writhes like a living thing before settling into legibility. Knock with the quill, enter with the cost. The bleeding roots tremble. Somewhere beyond them, deep in the earth, something drums its fingers against stone in a rhythm that matches the tome's frantic pages. Waiting, always waiting. Elrian raises the quill. The stories in his bones howl in recognition. This isn't a choice anymore. It's a chorus, and he's just learned the first note. The air in the library smells of burnt sugar and storm-wet parchment, a scent that clings to the back of Elrian's throat like a half-remembered dream. The shelves loom around him, not just tall but endless, their wooden spines warping in and out of focus as if the very architecture breathes. And then there's the Archivist, their cloak more holes than fabric, their fingers long enough to span 3 book widths at once. When they speak, it's with the cadence of pages turning backward. You'll find no titles here. They murmur, gesturing to the nearest shelf where the books squirm like restless cats. Only hunger's, and yours has already chosen. The tome in Elrian's hands twitches, its cover peeling open to reveal pages blank as fresh snowfall. But when he touches quill to parchment, the ink pools and spreads like blood, from a wound forming words he doesn't recall writing. The Crimson King wept when he first heard the throne's song. The letters pulse once before dissolving, leaving behind a stain that seeps through to the next page. The Archivist's breath rattles like a snake's warning. Careful little scribe, some memories bite when cornered. Elrian presses on. This time, the quill moves without his consent, scratching out phrases in jagged strokes. The crown's thorns grew inward, the courtier's laughter turned to glass. Each sentence fracturing into smaller and smaller shards until the page resembles a mosaic of broken mirrors. His hand aches, his vision swims, and then the truth strikes him. He's not recording the court's story. He's feeding it. The book isn't empty. It's ravenous. The Archivist materializes at his shoulder, their cloak shedding motes of dust that smell inexplicably of childhood bedrooms and extinguished candles. The price, they whisper, isn't paid in ink or memory. It's paid in absence. They tap a bony finger against the page, and where it lands, the parchment yawns open into a hole deeper than the chasm beneath the bone bridge. Elrian glimpses movement inside, not images, but the ghosts of unwritten tales, their shapes straining toward the light like drowned hands, breaking water. A choice hangs in the air, heavier than the quill, sharper than the crown's thorns. To finish the story means surrendering the space it occupied in his mind forever. The court's echoes will live on these pages, yes, but in his skull, there will only be silence where the whispers once thrived. The Archivist's smile is a crack in old paint. All libraries are built on such silences, they say, as the first forgotten word slithers from Elrian's ear and onto the page, its letters glistening like wet teeth. The drop of blood hits the page with a sound like a far-off door slamming shut. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then the ink writhes, twisting into letters so black they seem to suck the light from the air around them. The Crimson King's first sin was not cruelty. The words etch themselves, but mercy. Elrian's breath catches. This isn't his handwriting. The script is jagged, frantic, as if someone is carving it from the other side of the parchment. The Archivist makes a sound like a book's spine cracking, their elongated fingers twitching toward the quill. Stop, they hiss, but it's too late. The library's candles gutter in unison, plunging them into a darkness so complete it feels like the walls have dissolved. Then the laughter comes not from the shadows, but from the paper itself, a sound like dry leaves skittering across stone. The veins of crimson, branching through the page, pulse in time with Elrian's racing heartbeat, and suddenly, he understands. The curse wasn't broken when the throne shattered. It was waiting for ink, for blood, for a fool with a quill to give it new skin. Something cold brushes the nape of Elrian's neck. Not the Archivist's touch, this presence is older, hungrier. The air thickens with the scent of molten wax and spoiled wine, and the tome in his hands jerks as if trying to escape. The blood-inked letters peel off the page, hovering in the air like wasps around a nest, rearranging themselves into a sentence that wasn't there before. Every keeper becomes what they record. The Archivist's cloak billows, though there's no wind. You've woken the scribe, they whisper, and for the first time, fear roughens their papery voice. The laughter crescendos, and the hovering words explode into a swarm of ink-dark moths, their wings whispering secrets as they spiral upward. Where they pass, the library's shelves warp, their books sprouting thorns, their spines splitting to reveal teeth. The presence behind Elrian exhales a sigh that smells of extinguished candle wicks and the metallic tang of a blade left too long in the rain. Fingers graze his wrist, not to take the quill, but to guide it. The tip digs into his palm, carving a single word into his flesh with terrifying gentleness. Mine. The blood wells up, black as the throne's obsidian, and the last thing Elrian sees before the darkness swallows him whole is the Archivist bowing, not to him, but to the thing now standing at his shoulder. Its smile has too many teeth, and every one is a pen nib, sharp and gleaming. The library holds its breath. Somewhere, a new page turns. The The air curdles around the creature as it steps forward, not through the darkness, but from the very pages of the scattered tomes. Its body is a collage of torn parchment and broken spines. Its mouth a gash of wet ink that drips letters like saliva. Little scribe, it croons, and its voice is the sound of 100 libraries burning. You carry stories too heavy for your bones. The lore eater's fingers, if they can be called, that are scrolls unfurling endlessly, their edges blackened as if kissed by flame. It leans close, and Elrian smells the must of centuries, the sour tang of knowledge left to rot in locked vaults. The offer comes wrapped in a whisper. Give me the memory of 4 walls that once held you safe, and I will give you the truth of the Crimson Court, not the fragments. Not the lies, the marrow. The quill in Elrian's hand trembles, its tip pricking his skin, as if in warning. He knows the cost before he speaks. His mother's hands braiding his hair by the hearth, the way the rafters creaked in winter, like old men telling secrets, the scent of rosemary drying in the eaves. The lore eater's grin widens, ink pooling at its feet, a single nod, a gasp as the memory is ripped from him, not with pain, but with the sickening ease of a scab torn too soon. The creature convulses, its form swelling, parchment skin, stretching to accommodate the stolen recollection. For a heartbeat, Elrian sees his own childhood flicker in the monster's gullet. The woven rug by the fire, the chipped blue cup he drank from, the way the sunlight fell in diamonds through the shutters, before it's crushed into pulp and swallowed whole. The lore eater shudders with pleasure, its body now thrice its original size, patches of its parchment flesh glowing faintly with the ghost of his stolen hearth light. Then silence. The library's candles flare back to life, their light thin and watery. The archivist's desk stands empty, save for a slip of vellum pinned beneath a shard of obsidian. The handwriting is frantic, the ink still damp. Run, it will crave the rest of you next. Elrian staggers back, the tome clutched to his chest. The air tastes different now, sharper, hungrier. The shelves seem to lean in, their books whispering in languages that twist like smoke. He reaches for the quill, only to freeze. Its tip is no longer silver. It's rust red, the color of old blood, and the letters it scratches onto his palm, without his consent, are not words, but a map, a path through the stacks, leading somewhere the candles refuse to illuminate. The lore eater sighs behind him, a sound like a book closing for the last time. Oh, it murmurs, licking its inkai teeth. Did you think our bargain was done? The shadows between the shelves stir, resolving into shapes too angular to be natural. The creature's laughter follows Elrian as he runs, but the worst part isn't the pursuit. It's the gnawing hollow where his memory used to be, and the terrible understanding that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again, not even by fire. Not even by time. The door slams shut behind Elrian with a sound like 1,000 books snapping closed at once. The air here doesn't burn, it hums, thick with the scent of charred lavender and molten amber. The garden stretches before him, a surreal tapestry of flames, frozen mid-flicker, their edges crystallized into jagged sculptures that cast prismatic shadows across the ash-gray grass. At the center, a woman kneels, her robes the color of banked coals, her fingers trailing through a basin of liquid fire, as casually as one might stir tea. She doesn't look up as she speaks. The lore eater fears this place, not the flames, but what they represent. Her voice is the crackle of a hearth in winter, the kind that promises warmth but hides embers. Elrian's grip on the tome tightens. The cover sears his palms, the once dormant crimson sigils now writhing like live wires. The Keeper of Embers finally lifts her gaze, and her eyes are twin pools of molten gold, pupils shaped like dying stars. "You've been feeding it," she murmurs, nodding to the book. "Every word you wrote, every memory you bartered, it gave the curse new teeth." She rises, and the frozen flames shudder in her wake, their crystalline forms chiming like distant bells. The basin before her swirls, its fire neither hot nor cold, but something in between, a paradox made liquid. Purification isn't gentle, she warns, extending a hand. The offer is clear. Surrender the tome, let the flames scour it clean. But the book fights back, its pages flapping like the wings of a trapped bird, ink bleeding through the vellum in frantic, self-erasing loops. A name surfaces Althea before dissolving into smoke. Elrian freezes. That name wasn't in the chronicles. That name belonged to the king's lost queen, the one history forgot. The Keeper's lips press into a thin line. Some stories resist being told, others resist being silenced. She steps closer, and the garden reacts, the frozen flames leaning toward her like flowers to the sun. The basin won't just cleanse the book, it will rewrite it. But first, you must choose, preserve the truth or forge something new. A tremor runs through the ground. Beyond the garden's borders, something heavy slams against the door, the wood splintering under the force. The lore eater's voice slithers through the cracks, syllables dripping with the weight of devoured libraries. "You cannot hide what is already mine." The Keeper doesn't flinch. She dips her fingers into the basin, and the fire clings to her skin like liquid silk. "The flames remember what the world forgets," she says, holding out her hand. But memory is a blade. It cuts both ways. The tome convulses in Elrian's grip, and for a heartbeat, he sees it. Not as a book, but as a living thing, its spine a twisted spine, its pages gasping like lungs. The door cracks open. A scroll-like tendril whips through, snatching the tome from Elrian's hands. The Keeper moves faster. She hurls a handful of basin fire at the intruding tendril, and the garden erupts in a chorus of shattering glass as 1,000 frozen flames explode into motion. The fire doesn't burn. It unwrites, scouring the ink from the lore eater's stolen parchment flesh, leaving blank spaces where words once festered. The creature howls, a sound like 1,000 bookbindings tearing at once, and retreats. The door seals itself, but the damage is done. The tome lies open on the ground, its pages half scorched, half reborn, the ink still shifting like a restless tide. The Keeper exhales, her golden eyes dimming. "It's not over. The curse is in you now, scribe, not just the book." She presses a hand to his chest, and the heat of her touch makes his ribs ache. The fire can cleanse parchment, but a soul, that's a slower burn. Somewhere beyond the garden, the lore eater laughs, its voice already regaining strength. The Keeper's fingers tighten around Elrian's wrist, her nails leaving crescent moons of ember light on his skin. "Run, but remember, fire isn't just destruction. It's the first light after the long dark, and yours," she releases him, turning back to the basin. "Yours is just beginning to catch." The fire burns without heat, its surface shimmering like oil on water, reflecting faces, dozens of them, their features twisted in silent screams. The keeper's voice cuts through the garden's crystalline hum. To cleanse the book, you must face what it remembers, not the curse, but the souls it consumed. She gestures to the basin, where the flames ripple like a living tapestry, each flicker revealing another fragment of the court's buried history. Elrian hesitates, his fingers hovering above the fire's surface. It doesn't scorch, it pulls, as if the flames are made of liquid gravity. He plunges his hand in, and the world fractures. A grip locks around his wrist, cold as winter iron. A figure surges from the fire, not burning, but woven from the flames themselves. A young man with hollow cheeks and eyes that still smolder with unfinished songs. The bard's lips move soundlessly, his throat bearing the cruel mark of the Crimson King's justice, a brand in the shape of a gag. But when his fingers tighten around Elrian's arm, the silence shatters. The bard's voice floods Elrian's mind, not in words, but in melodies, layers of them, harmonies that spiral into a story far older than the Tome's ink. The court didn't fall to tyranny, it fell to love. The Crimson King's blade wasn't driven by madness, but by a desperate bargain, his life for the realm's survival. The throne's song wasn't a curse, it was a ward, a seal meant to contain something far worse, something that slithered up from the earth's roots and hungered for more than crowns. The bard's song crescendos, revealing the truth in jagged fragments. The king's final act wasn't suicide, it was a locking spell, his own heart's blood the key. But the throne twisted his sacrifice, turning protection into prison, love into legend, and legends into lies. The fire trembles, its surface now showing not faces, but a single image, the queen, Althea, her hands pressed to the throne's base, her lips forming a word that the flames refuse to speak. The bard's grip falters, his voice fades, the last notes dissolving into embers, but the truth lingers, searing itself into Elrian's bones. The tome at his feet flips open, its scorched pages now glowing with the bard's final verse, a lullaby for the damned, a requiem for the forgotten. The keeper watches, her golden eyes reflecting not fire, but grief. Some stories, she murmurs, don't need cleansing, they need witnesses. Outside the garden, the lore eater's laughter turns to a screech. The air reeks of burning vellum. The bard's hand slips back into the flames, but his song remains, echoing in the hollows of Elrian's mind. The truth is out now. And the curse, it's listening. The fire gutters, its light thinning to a faint glow as the bard's spirit dissolves into embers that dance briefly before vanishing. The keeper exhales, a slow, shuddering breath that sends ripples through the basin's dying flames. One not undone, she murmurs, lifting her gaze to the garden's shifting borders. But before she can say more, the air itself splits with a sound like tearing vellum. The frozen flames erupt, not melting, but stretching upward into a jagged archway of fire. Through the portal, the past bleeds into the present. A younger Crimson King kneels in a hall stripped bare of its grandeur, his crown discarded at his feet like a broken toy. His hands are raw, his fingers bloody from clawing at the throne's base, his voice hoarse with pleading. Take it back, he rasps to the empty air, his words echoing as if the walls themselves are laughing. I never meant for her to. The vision fractures, the king's confession cut short as the flames twist violently, reforming into a towering inferno. The heat is a living thing now, pressing against Elrian's skin like a warning. The keeper's robes flutter despite the absence of wind, her golden eyes wide with something sharper than surprise. The curse isn't just breaking, she says. It's fighting back. The portal's edges darken, the fire-blackened tendrils resolving into shapes too deliberate to be accidental. Claws, talons, the lore eater's fingerprints, searing their way through the barrier between realms. A screech rends the air, half parchment tear, half predator's snarl. The garden's crystalline flames shatter en masse, their fragments dissolving into acrid smoke that stings Elrian's eyes. The door, the real one, the one leading back to the library, groans under a sudden, brutal impact. Wood splinters. The lore eater's voice oozes through the cracks, thick with triumph. You cannot rewrite what was never truly written. The keeper seizes Elrian's wrist, her grip scalding. Listen carefully, she hisses, yanking him toward the smoldering portal. The king's plea. It's the second knot. Undo it, and the throne's hold weakens. But the moment you step through, the lore eater follows. Her free hand plunges into the basin, withdrawing a single, perfect ember. She presses it into his palm. It doesn't burn, it pulses, its rhythm syncopated, as if carrying a heartbeat out of time. This is all the fire I can spare. Use it to light the truth, but be swift. The ember's warmth spreads up Elrian's arm, threading through his veins like liquid sunlight. The portal wavers, the image of the broken king, flickering like a candle in a storm. Somewhere behind them, the door's hinges scream. The keeper releases him with a shove. Go. Elrian stumbles forward, not into flame, but through it, the heat parting around him like a curtain. The last thing he hears before the garden vanishes is the lore eater's roar of fury, and beneath it, the keeper's final, fading whisper, "Remember, scribe." Even the darkest ink fears the light. The study smells of dust and dried ink, the familiar sense of home now laced with something bitter beneath. Burnt parchment, perhaps, or the ghost of embers clinging to his clothes. The tome lies heavy in Elrian's hands, its cover dulled, the crimson sigils faded to the color of old bloodstains. For a heartbeat, nothing moves. Then the window across the room rattles, though there's no wind. His reflection stares back at him, or almost his reflection. The eyes are wrong, too sharp, too knowing, the corners crinkled with an amusement that doesn't belong to him. The smirk is unmistakable, the Crimson King's cruel curl of lips, the one etched into every surviving portrait. Elrian's breath fogs the glass, but the reflections doesn't. It mouths words without sound, fingers tapping against the pane, in a rhythm that matches the throne's forgotten song. The tome jerks in his grip, its pages fluttering open to a passage he doesn't remember writing. The ink is fresh, glistening like wet tar, forming a single sentence over and over in spiraling loops. The keeper becomes the key. Outside, a crow lands on the windowsill, its beak parted in a silent caw. The reflection's grin widens. It reaches through the glass, not breaking it, but passing through like smoke, and taps the book's cover once. Where its finger touches, the leather bubbles. A shape emerges, an eye weeping ink, its pupil a perfect miniature of the obsidian throne. The crow shrieks, a sound like a quill scraping too hard across parchment, and takes flight. The reflection's lips move again. This time, the words slither into Elrian's mind without passing through his ears. You didn't escape, scribe, you were delivered. The tome slams shut with a sound like a gavel falling. The study's candles gutter out, and in the sudden dark, two things become clear. The window never opened. And the crow, it wasn't real. It was a memory, one that doesn't belong to him. The keeper's warning echoes in his bones. Some stories are prisons, but the cruelest ones are the ones we carry willingly. The reflection winks. The first drop of ink falls from the tome's spine, hitting the floor with a sound like a heartbeat. The whispers come first as sighs soft, shapeless things that coil around Elrian's thoughts as he drifts between sleep and waking. By the third night, they sharpen into syllables, his name spoken in voices that shouldn't exist beyond the tome's sealed pages. He wakes with ink under his fingernails, though the book hasn't been opened. The Archivist's note crinkles in his pocket when he reaches for it, the parchment now brittle as dried leaves. The words have changed, not faded, but rewritten, the ink fresh and glistening like wet wounds. The curse seeks a new vessel. Fire should cleanse, fire should end. But when Elrian thrusts the tome into the hearth, the flames recoil, hissing into plumes of smoke that twist into grasping hands before dissolving. The book tumbles to the stones unharmed, its cover cool to the touch, the embossed sigils pulsing faintly as if amused. The knock, when it comes, is two precise, three-measured raps that resonate like a judge's gavel. The stranger on the threshold wears a traveler's cloak, but the fabric hangs wrong, as if tailored for someone with extra joints. Their eyes are the true giveaway, hollows where irises should be, the sockets filled with a darkness that drinks the candlelight. They say you've held the Crimson King's truth. The stranger murmurs, their voice the rasp of a quill dragged too slowly across parchment. They say the court speaks through you now. Elrian's throat closes, the lie. It's just stories sticks to his tongue like spoiled honey, because the truth is worse. The tome isn't whispering, he is. The words bubble up unbidden, syllables he doesn't recognize clotting in his mouth like old blood. The stranger leans closer, their breath smelling of iron and burnt rosemary. Ah, they sigh, as if tasting the unspoken confession. So it begins again. Outside, the wind rises, carrying with it the scent of distant rain and something older, the damp earth reek of a freshly opened grave. The stranger's smile doesn't reach their hollow eyes. They already know his answer. Some questions aren't meant to be spoken aloud. Some curses prefer to wear their victims' voices. The stranger's fingers hover over the tome's cover, their cracked skin glowing faintly at the seams, as if their body is nothing more than a poorly bound manuscript straining at its stitches. The words they murmur aren't just ancient, they're alive, curling through the air like smoke from a dying fire, and the book's lock surrenders with a sigh. Elrian's breath catches. He'd thought the curse broken, the throne's song silenced, but curses don't die, they hibernate. The stranger's lips peel back in a smile too wide for their face, revealing teeth filed to points, each one etched with tiny, writhing runes. You thought it was over, they whisper, and their voice isn't a single sound, but a chorus, the Crimson King's rasp, the bard's broken hum, the scribe's ink-stained mutterings. The tome levitates between them, its pages fanning open to reveal not words, but windows, each one showing a different moment of the court's unraveling. Elrian sees himself reflected in every pane, his face twisted with the same dawning horror as the king's in his final moments. The room contracts, the walls bowing inward like the ribs of some great beast, taking its first breath in centuries. The whispers aren't just voices now, they're hands, cold and skeletal, plucking at Elrian's sleeves, his hair, the corners of his mouth, as if trying to pry loose the screams he's swallowed. The stranger's form flickers, their human shell crumbling like ash to reveal what's beneath, a being woven from contracts and clauses, their body a tapestry of unbroken vows and unpaid debts. The curse didn't need a throne to survive. It needed a scribe. A gust of wind tears through the study, scattering papers, extinguishing candles. The tome's pages settle on one image, Elrian, standing in the garden of frozen flames, the keeper's ember pulsing in his palm. The stranger, no, the Archivist lets out a sound that might be laughter or weeping. You carried the fire, they rasp, but you never lit the pyre. Their fingers brush the page, and the scene erupts into motion, the flames thawing, surging upward to consume the memory itself. The lesson is clear. Some stories aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to burn. The tome slams shut with finality, its lock resealing with a click like a bone, snapping back into place. The Archivist's form solidifies, their ember light dimming to something almost human. Almost. Their hollow eyes hold Elrian's for a heartbeat before they turn toward the door. The next chapter waits. They murmur, and the words aren't a threat, but an invitation, one that curls around Elrian's ribs like a noose or a lifeline. Outside, the first drops of rain strike the windows, hissing as they hit the glass. The storm isn't coming, it's here. The quill trembles in Elrian's grip, its tip already dripping ink darker than midnight. The stranger's shadow stretches unnaturally long, their form flickering between the Archivist's hollow eyes and the Crimson King's rictus grin. The whispers rise to a deafening chorus, not just from the tome, but from the walls, the floor, the very air, as if the realm itself is holding its breath. Choose, the voices demand, but the command is a trick. There is no choice, only consequence. Elrian exhales, and the sound is the scrape of a chair in a silent library, the rustle of a page turned too quickly. He knows the truth now. The curse wasn't meant to be broken. It was meant to be transformed. The first stroke of the quill doesn't land on parchment. It carves into the study's wooden floor, the ink seeping deep, tendrils of black spreading like roots, seeking water. The shadows shudder, their edges sharpening into something deliberate, hungry. The stranger's laughter is the crackle of burning vellum. You think you can rewrite what was written in blood. Their voice splinters, fracturing into a dozen tones, the king's anguish, the scribe's resignation, the lore eater's insatiable craving. But Elrian isn't listening. His hand moves with a certainty that doesn't belong to him, the quill guided by something older than the court, older than the throne. The ink doesn't form words. It forms windows. Through them, fractured glimpses shimmer, the Crimson King's blade hovering over his own heart, not in despair, but in defiance. The Queen's hands, unmarked by time, pressing against the throne's base in a gesture too tender for ruin. The bard's gag dissolving into song mid-breath. The lies the curse wove unravel with each stroke, the ink rewriting not just history, but memory. The shadows recoil, hissing. The stranger's form wavers, their borrowed face melting like wax. You'll drown in it, they snarl, but the thread is hollow. The tome's pages flutter wildly, not in protest, but in release, the ink lifting from the vellum like smoke from a snuffed candle. Elrian's vision blurs. The quill isn't just a tool anymore. It's a conduit, and the story pouring through it isn't his. It's theirs, the lost, the erased. The floor buckles. The study's door creaks open, not onto the hallway, but onto the garden of frozen flames, the keeper's ember still pulsing where it fell. The stranger shrieks, their body unraveling into scrolls of burnt parchment, their hollow eyes widening in realization. This isn't an ending, it's an exchange. Elrian's final stroke isn't ink, it's light, the kind that comes after long darkness, after the last ember has guttered and the night seems eternal. It spills across the page, the floor, the stranger's disintegrating form, and in its wake, the whispers don't fade. They change, the chorus softens, the voice is no longer pleading, but speaking, singing, remembering. The tome slams shut with a sound like a sigh. The study is silent. The shadows are just shadows, and the quill in Elrian's hand, it's just a quill, for now.